Good day. Welcome to Agenda here on One News. Sitting in for Cito Beltran, I'm Regina Lay. Let's begin the program with our daily starters, shall we? This quote is from endurance athlete and retired Navy SEAL David Goggins, and he says, "If you can get through doing things that you hate to do, on the other side is greatness." Now let's take a look at the front pages of the Philippine Star. Little President CHR Chief named former Supreme Court Chief Justice Lucas Bersamin has taken his oath to become the new Executive Secretary, replacing Vic Rodriguez, while Richard Palpal-Latok has been named as new chairman of the Commission on Human Rights. The peso is now less than a cent away from 59 to the US dollar. The Philippine peso continued to weaken against the dollar, slumping to a new all-time low at 58.99 to a dollar yesterday. We'll be discussing this later in the program with RCBC's Chief Economist, Mike Ricafort. The SC warns Badoy of contempt for putting judge at risk. In a statement, the Supreme Court en banc issued a warning against, quote, those who continue to incite violence through social media and other means. This after former NTF-LCAC spokesperson Lorraine Badoy made a social media post that was perceived as red tagging of Manila Trial Court Judge Marlo Magdoza Malagar. And as the wrath of Typhoon Karding left over 1.2 billion pesos worth of damage to agriculture, the country may now have to resort to rice importation to secure supply. How will this affect our farmers? We'll be discussing that in another segment coming up. All right. Again, good day. My name is Regina Lay, sitting in for Cito Beltran, and let's get going. We were going to have a first interview with a farmer from Nueva, Ecija, who posted about the damage to his rice field, but we don't have him on the line just yet. And so we're going to go for a quick break right now and then try to fix the technical difficulties behind the scenes and come back out. Stay with us, please. right, welcome back to Agenda. I'm Regina Lay, sitting in for Cito Beltran. Let's get right on to one of our top stories. The Philippine peso closed at 58.99 to the dollar yesterday. That marks yet another record low for the local currency. And we have with us an economist today to analyze the impact of all of this on the country. Watch this.
Mike Ricafort is the Chief Economist of RCBC. He has been with the said bank since 2006. Ricafort obtained his Master of Business Administration degree from the Ateneo Graduate School of Business.
Hi, Mike. Very good to see you again. It's been a long time since we last spoke. I can't even remember what the peso was back then.
Yeah, good to see you again, and good to be back with the agenda after almost a year. Back then, that was 2017. Yeah, it was maybe much lower, definitely than now.
Well, actually, the peso has lost nearly 15% this year, right? And that's not common. That's not normal for currency depreciation. Usually, it goes a lot slower than that. Has all of this begun to alarm you?
Well, so far, because it's a global thing, Reg, because first, if you look at other regional currencies, like the Japanese yen depreciated by nearly 25% already since the start of the year. So the peso already depreciated by 15.7%. That's almost 16% since the start of the year. The South Korean one around 18%. Then our neighboring countries like Thailand, they depreciated. They're moving closer to us. They have depreciated by 12%, and the likes of Chinese yuan, Malaysian ringgit, a depreciation of between 10 to 11% at least. So we're just within the vicinity of our neighbors when it comes to the currency performance. So it's taken in relative terms, but definitely from the point of view of the ordinary Filipino, it would translate to higher import prices. Because most of the imports of the country are paid in US dollars. So automatically, on the currency alone, in paying for imports, it's now more expensive to buy, name it, any of the country's biggest imports like oil, food, even capital equipment, construction materials, vehicles, and many other consumer products. So automatically, that's an increase right away, because we say definitely if we pay in dollars, we buy dollars, and we use our pesos, so it's almost 16% more expensive now. That's also one of the reasons why fuel prices like gasoline, diesel, at least an offsetting factor, oil prices are already at their lowest since early January, but we haven't really seen that. Those levels locally, because what offsets the lower global oil prices is the weaker peso. So that's adding to inflation. That's the bottom line. It would really, in fact, the local monetary authorities, they already signaled that they don't want further weakness in the peso because that adds to inflation. And we all know that not only the local central bank, but many central banks around the world, led by the US, their primary mandate is price stability or stable prices. So they would do everything at their disposal to do that. Maybe at some point, at least we already saw signals also from Malacanang that they're closely watching as well and monitoring the developments, because this definitely adds to inflation, because that's a common concern of everybody, especially the poor. They're the most hit by higher prices or higher inflation because of their limited budgets. We all know we came from pandemic, and we have lost. There were job losses, livelihood losses. So the last thing that they would need right now would be higher prices. They don't need that right now. So they need to, either they tighten their belts, they have to borrow. So it's making them worse off. That's why the central banks around the world, especially the US, they're dead serious. They're really bent. They increase their determination to resolve to bring down elevated inflation, precisely for that reason also. And the same goes here at some point in the Philippines. So
right.
Yeah, there are winners and losers. Yes, like we've already started those adversely affected,
Right,
those who will
right.
stand to lose, but
Yep.
those who would win would be the dollar earners, like
Mm,
OFWs,
mm,
the exporters, the BPOs, the foreign
yeah.
investors, the foreign tourists, the balikbayans. They have dollars, they own dollars, they're earning dollars. Automatically, it's a windfall right away of almost 16% since the start of the year. What used to be 51 at the start of the year, now it's almost 59. That's 8 pesos. Say $1,000. If they convert what they earn or what they
Yeah.
own in dollars, it used to be
Mm,
51,000 pesos at the start of the year. Now it's 58,000. So there's that 7,000 pesos windfall for those sectors. However, if they spend it, there goes the challenge. They have to deal with higher prices. That's
right,
the
right,
reality for
right.
everybody else. But it's better than nothing compared to those that sheerly or purely earn in pesos. So it's better than nothing. But for everybody else, yeah, the same goes. So, or a typical importer or a consumer would like to purchase from abroad, and they
Right.
would settle
Okay.
what they purchase. So
Yeah.
to pay more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
Regina.
All right. Well, yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's a lot that you said there that we have to unpack one by one. Let me start with this. So you're right. President Marcos did say that he is closely monitoring the situation. That's according to Press Secretary Trixie Angeles. He also said he's in close contact with the economic team. But what it comes down to, though, is they also have very limited tools, right? Unless they decide to intervene in the forex market, just like Japan did. What else is there left to do other than keep raising interest rates? And the Banco Central can't even go at the same pace as the Fed, right? So what else is there to do?
We, Reg, when the local authorities, they have a good track record in managing the exchange rate in the past. I'm talking about 2004, especially 2004, 2005. They kept the record high at 56.45 for the dollar. During those times, there were budget deficit crises back then, some political related uncertainties. That was 17 to 18 years ago, and that was sustained for 18 good years. That record high. Of course, there were volatilities. It went down to as low as 40, and now until September 1 of this year, that was the last time that we saw it at 56.45. So they were able to sustain it for 18 good years at 56.45. That record. What did they use? Especially during the times when it was relatively elevated. So they raised interest rates. So that's also one of the potent tools available, just like what the US is doing. That's precisely one of the reasons why the dollar is strong, because the US has been aggressively raising interest rates from zero. It started at zero in March when they
Right.
started, last March 16. Now it's at a range of 3 to 3.25. So that really means a lot for global investors, for billions, hundreds of billions of funds worldwide, pension funds, retirement funds. They do invest worldwide. They have
Yeah.
choices. So now, same goes here in the Philippines. One way to
But
counteract
but the
that.
problem but the problem as well, Mike, is that the Banco Central can't go as fast as the Fed, right? Because the economy is fragile. We've only just reopened this year. Uh, we're several months behind in terms of reopening compared to the US. So they're trying to hit that delicate balance, right? They don't want growth to slow, but at the same time, they don't want it too hot either, right? Precisely because the currency is depreciating so fast. So again, what is the right balance here?
True, Reg, because yeah, something that's a reality now. It just came from the pandemic. The recovery is fragile, so there's the need to also manage that properly. But yeah, our policy rates during the pandemic, the record low was 2%. The country, the BSB started to raise rates last May 19th. So that was the time when the interest differential between Philippine and the U.S. Central Bank interest rates narrowed to 100 basis points. Because never in recent memory, maybe at least for the past 20, 30 or so years, it's always that local policy rates or the BSP rates are always higher than the Fed. But of course, that's also a dilemma for many other countries. Just like Japan, they never increase rates. They're close to zero, and also for other developed countries, they're still close to zero. A lot of them already raised rates, but it's still, of course, the Fed is much faster because they have a peculiar problem there. The inflation is at 40-year high, so it's proportional. The response is proportional enable to bring down their elevated inflation. Whereas our inflation here, it's 6.3%. That's near 4-year highs. In the US, it's 8.3%. That's among 40-year highs or since January 1982. So that's a difference. And also for the rest of the world. So, but that's the immediate effect. The interest differential in favor of the dollar, that's making the US currency attractive in terms of higher interest income for deposits, for bonds, other fixed income instruments. So,
Right.
despite the fact that the US is also a huge net importing country. So, what really comes to the fore now is the interest differential play, that's making the dollar alluring and attractive to global investors. The higher interest rate returns that investors get. So now the local central bank, the policy rate now has increased to 4.25. So that's 225 basis points increase. The US has increased by a total of now by 300 basis points. So now, what has been signaled? Policy response. Well, one way to address this, in fact, local authorities signaled lately that that a surprise or upcycle increase is possible. And for local interest rates, of course, if you have higher local interest rates, that would help stabilize or support the peso. And secondly, they have also acknowledged that they've been intervening from time to time if necessary in the market to smoothen the volatility. Like for instance, last week it was it was relatively stable at 58.50. Yesterday it was relatively stable at a little less than 59. So those are the immediate measures, and of course, the overshadowing factor is still what's happening externally, because why is the global currency market behaving that way in terms of a stronger dollar? We have seen the likes of the British pound falling to record lows. So that's really supporting the strong dollar narrative worldwide, because the Fed is again, based on their last meeting, expected to raise rates again by another 0.75% by November 2. So that's really triggering it. And towards the end of the year, there's a balance of another rate hike of between 100 to 125 basis points. So that's why it's really keeping the other global central banks at their toes.
Right. So Mike, yes, we do know that this is a global phenomenon, and many other countries, as you mentioned, are suffering the same fate. The thing about the peso, though, first of all, a lot of people are asking us if it's going to hit 60 or 65. Now, the answer to 60 is pretty easy, because we're already potentially touching 59 today or even tomorrow, right? But what about 65? And the thing there is that BSP Governor Felipe Medalla seems like he's happy to find the natural floor for the peso. Even though on the one hand, yes, they keep raising interest rates and responding to the Fed. On the other hand, he has also signaled that, he's happy to let the peso, the currency, find its natural floor according to what the market dictates, right? So again, come back to the big question. A lot of people are asking us, 60, 65, are we going to hit that? And when will we hit that?
Well, it's largely how the dollar would perform again going forward, because we're all affected in the global community. So whatever happens to, say, the yen again, the Korean won, the Thai baht, the Chinese yuan, and the other ASEAN currencies, well, that would determine the direction. So the markets would definitely determine that. And putting things in perspective, our exchange rate, we started, as mentioned earlier, we started at 51 at the start of the year. So now it's almost 59. That's almost 8 pesos. That's almost 16%. A year ago, when we still had lockdowns, June of last year, our low was 47.60. So it's really, the dollar peso has really gone a long way since June of last year. Imagine, from 47.60, now it's almost at 59. So that's almost 12 pesos movement since then, or more than 20%. So then the record high, the previous record high for 18 years at 56.45. The last time we saw that was September 1. or nearly a month ago. And now we're already up by 2 pesos and 50 centavos almost since then, or almost 5%. So there you go. If you look at how it has been behaving, so it looks like, well, at the rate that it's going, imagine 2 pesos and 50 centavos in less than a month. So,
So again, the question there is, you do think that we will likely hit 60 or 65?
It's within striking distance, so to speak. But of course, it's a function and based on the dynamics in the global currency markets. But that's how the momentum looks like. Say a month ago, and then June of this year, the previous cap was somewhere around 50 to 50. Yeah, because those have been signs that at least there were stabilization being made. So the last time in June was 50 to 50. So it's already up by 6 pesos and 50 centavos in about nearly 4 months time. So yeah, so that has been the dynamics also, the rate of movement of the exchange rate. But of course, yeah, the consequence would be higher inflation, higher import prices. That would be because the Philippines is a net importing country. Unlike these other countries that we mentioned earlier, like the Japanese, Japan, South Korea, China, Malaysia, and most of the other major ASEAN countries and Asian countries, they're net exporting countries, meaning even before the pandemic, they would even fight tooth and nail to weaken their currencies, and the US would even cite them, like China, as a currency manipulator if they unduly weaken their currencies. But now,
Right.
it's really, what they're getting what they want right now.
Right.
A weaker currency enabled to make their exports the major driver for economic recovery from the pandemic, and that would also make their exports more price competitive because from the point of view of the world, it's cheaper to buy from them. So,
Mike, let me put the question more bluntly to you. 65 to the greenback. Do you think the Banco Central will let it fall to that level before they intervene, or if they even intervene, or do you think they might step in before then?
Well, at least we already saw signals, even straight from Malacanang. It's a stern warning also. Because of the inflationary impact that they're already they're really focused on it right now. They would give priority to it right now, and they're watching. So it's also, well, that's also a warning also, so to speak, especially against undue speculation. So that's why, because it's not good for inflation if the peso continues to weaken. It's gonna add to prices, and that's gonna add to the burden especially to the poor, because in the region, there are only two net importing countries. It's the Philippines and India. And the trade balance of the country, if you go to the numbers, last year, the net imports of the country was 42.2 billion. That is similar to the highs of around 43 billion in a year prior to the pandemic. During the pandemic, of course, when there were lockdowns, commodity prices were lower back then, much lower. So the trade deficit of the country was 25 billion. Now, based on the latest data, the trade deficit of the country for this year would reach more than 50 billion. There's even a chance for it to go towards 60 billion. So that's a net increase of 15 billion of net imports. So that's why, well, it's something structural also to address. Like, for instance, there's a need also to reduce reliance on importation, like for food, because our neighboring countries, they've done it. They're producing a lot for their own requirements, their food, their other manufactured items, their industries. Because unlike we have seen, in recent years, whenever there are, say, shortages, and of course economics. It's much cheaper to import, say, rice and sugar and other And also the framework, because we have free trade already, zero tariffs since 2010, ASEAN, China. So that encourage also increased importation of even manufactured
Right.
goods and other
But
products.
yeah. But Mike, that's talking more about long-term solutions, right? I mean, President Marcos is aware of this. He's already made agriculture his priority. He said that he wants to lessen our reliance on imports. But again, we're talking about very long-term solutions here. I did want to zoom out though a little bit and focus on cast our eyes over the general economy, because one other thing that's worrying investors and that might complicate the picture is the possibility of a U.S. recession, right? So the ADB IMF joint annual meeting is ongoing as we speak, and I was just talking to some of the economists there who are already saying that it's built in. It's an inevitability that the U.S. will go into recession either sometime early this next year or later in the year next year, which of course is going to be a problem because every time it's one of those things, right? The US catches a cold, everyone sneezes. So is this what you're looking at as well? Is this what you're seeing?
It looks like a foregone conclusion also, Reg. If you look at the data, look at the quarter and quarter, because because the technical definition of recession is two consecutive quarters of negative quarter and quarter declines in the US economy. So the data has been there. It's just awaiting further confirmation by the National Bureau of Economic Research. And at the rate the Fed has been raising rates, it's really a deliberate move on them. It's really designed, that aggressive Fed rate hikes to significantly slow down the economy to the point of, the risk of recession in the US, which is the world's biggest economy. And just for them to, the bottom line is to bring down the elevated inflation. If that's necessary, they would do it. They would just to bring down, that's the unintended consequence, slowing down demand, and we have seen already commodity prices worldwide going down. Also, that's one of the reasons why oil, wheat, and other major commodities have gone down to 8-month lows, or even before the Russia-Ukraine war started. Actually, that was the main cause of everything, of inflation. That's why it was triggered by the Russia-Ukraine war and the disruptions in the global supply chain. So it's going to slow things down. The global economic recovery in terms of trade, exports, imports, foreign investments, portfolio investments. So yeah, that's really the unintended consequence. And of course, because financing is much more expensive, so it would somewhat discourage also borrowers, because of the more expensive lending rates or borrowing rates. So it would slow down new investments, the need to buy many products, including commodities. That's why we're seeing that already. So yeah, that's an indirect consequence. Also, from the point of view of the Philippines, that would also mean slower OFW remittances, and also, and to some extent, some slowdown in tourism business if there would be a recession in the US. So those are the realities. Those are the cause and the unintended consequence in the quest to bring down the elevated inflation.
All right. That's a pretty gloomy outlook there, Mike. Okay, so you do feel it's an inevitability that we might see a U.S. recession in the next few quarters. And then on the other hand, you still have the peso continuing its downfall. So in and amidst all of this, what can the government here do to alleviate the pain a little bit for the citizens?
Well, immediately, especially the poorest of the poor, there have been proposals for increased subsidies. They have already, for the past couple of months, even if it's a relatively smaller amount, say 500 pesos per month for the poorest of the poor. So yeah, that's one option, enable for them to, at least offset the adverse effects of inflation and maybe also any adverse effects of the economic slowdown worldwide. would also indirectly affect our shores. No? And yeah, well, of course, it's really a painful solution would be also to raise interest rates also because that's one way, just like what the U.S. is doing. First is to maintain the comfortable interest differential with the U.S., enable to prevent the peso from weakening further. Yeah, that's been their tool in the past. They've been successful to stabilize the peso for 18 good years from 2004 until September 1 of this year. So they could adapt that again. They have that framework in place. They have the tools. Like, for instance, in 2018, when inflation was relatively high also, relatively higher, the policy rates were doing around 5% to 6%. But of course, that's prior to the pandemic. Now that's an entirely it's we're dealing with entirely new paradigm and challenges after the pandemic. And in 2004, 2005, the highest that the local policy rates went was 6% to 7% levels. So that's one available tool for them. Well, it's really, there's some sacrifice to it. Of course, funding costs would increase, borrowing costs or loan rates would increase. But if that would take to stabilize the peso, so that's one of the options available to them because they have successfully done it. So we're actually the market is also waiting for also any tangible steps related to that matter. If they would, and of course, also smoothening smoothening or some form of intervention also to smoothen the volatility that has also been applied, and as well as other liquidity tools in the market to say siphon up some of the excess liquidity. Right now, the major tools for doing so has been through the weekly, every Wednesday, the term deposit facility auction, and every Friday, the 28-day securities. So it used to be reserve requirements, but they're trying to wind down the use of reserve requirements.
Reserve requirements.
Yeah. So
just to free up more liquidity, basically, in the market, right?
Yeah, but now one way enabled to reduce the supply of pesos being used for speculation, they could siphon off some of those excess pesos. So those are the tools available to them.
Right.
So the markets are awaiting definitely. And of course in fulfilling the price stability mandate.
Right.
And,
but the overall message that I'm getting still though is that it's time to buckle up. We're going to be in for a bumpy ride. We're going to have to leave that interview there, Mike. We thank you so much for your time today. Mike Ricafort, Chief Economist of RCBC. We're going to pause for a quick break right now. Keep it here on Agenda on One News.
Thank you so much, guys.
Welcome back to Agenda. I'm Regina Lay. More than 170 lawyers have asked the Supreme Court to take firm action against former NTF LCAC spokesperson Lorraine Badoy for her tirades and threats against Manila Regional Trial Court Judge Marlo Magdoza Malagar. Let's hash this out with our next guest. Take a listen.
Attorney Burt Estrada currently serves as the National President of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, where he also sits as chairperson of the 25th Board of Governors. Estrada is also a datu of the Bukidnon Tagaloanon tribe, an indigenous community in Malaybalay City, Bukidnon.
All right, Attorney Burt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning.
We have a lot to talk about. First of all, how serious does IBP, your group, perceive the threats that were made, quote unquote threats made by Lorraine Badoy? So much so that you guys, that the lawyers and judges feel like they had to act on it and issue a statement. Give us a sense of what the discussions were like.
Well, the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, as the mandatory organization of lawyers, is charged with defending the integrity and independence of our judicial system. And so upon hearing and seeing this recent attack by Ms. Badoy and other personalities in social media, not only on an individual judge who was just doing her job in deciding a case based on evidence in the law, it also is an affront to the integrity, independence, and authority of our courts. And so this tends to debase the people's trust and confidence in our judicial system, which also greatly affects society as a whole. And so the Integrated Bar of the Philippines has issued the statement and published the same in defense of the integrity and independence of our judicial system.
All right.
Can you hear me po?
Attorney Burt, moving on now. Aside from that post that we're talking about, there were other statements linking the judge to CPP, NPA. I was just wondering how concerning that was, again, for the IBP, that you have judges being linked to the Communist Party of the Philippines. Is that something that you've seen before, not seen before? How are you perceiving this?
Well, it is one form of making such utterance and statements in attacking the integrity of an individual judge. No? But in the past 6 years, perhaps, no, especially during the last administration, we have seen a number of these kinds of attacks, not just trying to implicate lawyers and judges as supporters of a certain group, but also during the drug war as cuddlers of drug personalities. Whenever a lawyers for someone who's accused of a crime, or a judge who renders a decision against the prosecution of an alleged drug criminal. I've seen this, and in the last few years, we have seen attacks on the bodily security and on the persons of those that are being implicated. And so it is a very serious issue, because it is not just attacking a reputation of an individual or that of an institution, but it poses grave danger upon the persons that are being implicated. And so it is not only for lawyers and judges and even journalists, but even individual persons can be the subject of these kinds of attack. And so we should not tolerate these kinds of attack.
Attorney, I'm glad you brought that up, no, because I was watching your interview on our show, The Chiefs, last night as well about this, and you were trying to make a point about individual citizens, right? So one of the hosts was asking you where we draw the line. Is it with judges? Is it just with judges? What if an ordinary citizen was attacked similarly online, right? What recourse do they have? And if you could just talk us through again what your answer was to that. What recourse does the ordinary person have if they, for example, got into the crosshairs of someone like Lorraine Badoy, right? Over some such issue, right? What can they do? Do they have the same rights as a judge would?
Yes, of course. Right now, since Ms. Badoy is, I believe, a private citizen already, before when she was a public officer, we could have, I think there were some cases filed on administrative liability for her conduct unbecoming of a public officer. But now, even private citizen, as a private citizen, she can be prosecuted even for attacks against individual citizens, because speech, no, although we closely protect the freedom of expression and the freedom of the press, but these are not absolute rights. And so speech that are libelous or threaten others and causes harm are not constitutionally protected. And so individuals can go to court and file cases in order to vindicate the violation of their rights when they are being also defamed or threatened by statements of persons such as Ms. Badoy.
Just to repeat, if there's a threat of bodily harm, anyone can go to court.
Yes, of course, because that is an offense under our revised penal code.
And that is not protected by the freedom of speech.
Yes, it is not. That is not a constitutionally protected speech.
I wonder if you're able to give us an idea of just how long a process like that would take. Say somebody went to court making a complaint about, again, a former official. Then, how long would a process like that take?
Well, upon filing a complaint before the National Prosecution Service, we would presume that a preliminary investigation can be conducted within, I believe, 15 days to 30 days, and giving the respondent the opportunity to respond. And thereafter, the National Prosecution Service is to resolve such complaint. And when it finds probable cause that the respondent may have committed such a crime, then it files an information in our courts, and thereafter trial shall proceed. Right now, in these kinds of cases, although our courts have already issued rules on to speed up hearings, but in reality, in the length of time might depend on many other factors, such as the number of case dockets in a certain court where you might have been filed or raffled off, or the availability even of prosecutors and judges. Perhaps that can be entirely terminated in 6 months to a year.
So it takes the usual, the length of time in court, basically 6 months to a year. I think that's medyo fast na, isn't it?
Yes. I said in other jurisdictions or in other areas, the conditions might be different, and it might take longer. But what's important is that a person, when is aggrieved, there's cause of action, that he files the appropriate case in order to vindicate his rights and to protect others from further kinds of attacks like this. Because if we do not take action, then we are also contributing to to these kinds of attacks to continue, no? And others being victimized as well.
Attorney Burt, let's go back to that statement that Lorraine Badoy made. And it's been pointed out that because nga it's hypothetical, right? She said, what if? What if I kill a judge? So it can be construed or it can be argued in a court of law that, well, it's hypothetical. So why should it hold water, right? It's not a direct threat to anyone. What do you have to say about that?
Well, that can be her defense if she is ever, if ever a case is filed against her for those threats. But in our discussions in some of our friends in the legal community, that kind of strategy might not be appreciated by a court when it is being tried, because it tends to be cunning, but our courts may be able to pierce beyond such strategy. And even other lawyers also mentions that that statement even might already constitute sedition, because it amounts to inciting people attacking a public officer, from that is just doing her job. And so that will be a matter that will be threshed out in court. And I personally believe that that cannot hold water if that is her defense.
Attorney, lastly, I want to give you a chance to talk us through the Judiciary Marshals Act, which is the new law that was passed, in terms of how can this address the problem of judges being threatened. How far do you think it can go?
Well, I think this is also a very great opportunity to see the effectiveness of such law, which I've mentioned is all very recent. And that is why part of our statement in the IBP was to call for the activation of this law for our court martials, in order to provide the necessary protection, not only to Judge Malagar, but to our judges, so that they can continue to do their function without threats, and so their independence can be maintained. Because without our judges being able to do their jobs freely from threats, then our people might not have the confidence to go to our judicial system for redress and just take the law into their own hands. And that will be very detrimental to our society.
Attorney Burt Estrada, I wish you well as you wage this battle. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. Agenda will pause for a quick break, but we will return right after. Keep it here on One News. Attorney Burt Estrada, National President of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines.
Thank you po.
Hello po, Mang Felix. Good morning po.
Hello po, good morning po.
Sige po, Mang Felix, standby po tayo. Kayo na po yung aming susunod na kakausapin.
Ay, sige po, sir.
Welcome back to Agenda. My name is Regina Lay. I'm sitting in for Asito Beltran. Our last guest for today, very quickly, is a farmer who struck a chord with Filipinos. Let's get to know him more in this video.
Felix Pangibitan is a farmer from the town of Laur in Nueva Ecija. He recently went viral after he took a video of his rice field before Typhoon Karding made landfall in their province.
Mang Felix, salamat for joining us today. Didiretsuhin ko na, Mang Felix. Ano pong tulong sana ang gusto niyong hilingin sa gobyerno, particularly na sa Department of Agriculture?
Ay, may masyado pong malawak yung tanong niyo eh. Kasi po, sa agriculture, kulang po talaga sa pansin. Maraming proyekto yung DA na dapat para sa farmer, hindi naman po nakakaabot. Napakaganda po ng mga programa nila, pero sa implementation po, hindi po kaaya-aya para sa aming mga partner po. Kaya nga po sana, kung meron silang tulong, huwag na pong padaanin sa napakadaming ahensya, idirekta na po sa amin. Pagdating po kasi sa amin, kakapurit na kumbaga sa kinapay po. At saka po yun lang po muna pala. Kasi sa gobyerno, marami rin kami sa anong hiling. Nung po kasing panahon ni dating Pangulong Pinoy, kung ang presyo ng palay ay nasa 18, 19, ganyan, lowest 17, nakakaagapay pa po kami. Ibig sabihin, nakakasabay pa kami sa gastos ba. Nung nagbago administrasyon, pinairal yung RTL. Wala na po. Masyado na po kaming naapi. Hindi na kami makasabay ba sa pamumuhay, pangkaraniwang pamumuhay na Pilipino. Hindi lang po ang masasabi ko po.
Yung tulong naman na sa local government unit ninyo, Mang Felix, nakatanggap na po ba kayo? Kahit anong klaseng tulong pinansyal or kahit anong klaseng tulong, nakatanggap na po ba kayo?
Ay, so far po, sa ngayon wala pa kasi busy rin po yung sigurong alkalde, mayor. Kararating din po niya kasi sa bakasyon eh. Pero ang DA po, kaisa ng PCIC, nung bago po magtaniman, tinulungan naman kami para ma-shop yung mga bukid namin. Libre po yun, kaya ang inaasahan namin premium na makukuha yung indemnity, kung sakali, ma-approval. Konti lang din po kasi napakalaki po na naging losses namin eh. Pero yung direktang tulong mula sa pamahalaang lokal, wala pa po.
Sana nga po makadating na sa inyo soon. Mang Felix, huling-huli na po, no? Anong mensahe niyo po para kay Pangulong Marcos, lalo na ngayon ay tumatayo rin siya bilang Secretary ng Agrikultura?
Sa mahal natin pong Pangulo, sana po tutuhanin niya yung pangako niya, nakakalingain kami mga farmer, itong agricultural sector, tututukan niya talaga. Pababain po niya sana sa amin yung para sa amin. Kasi po, sa totoo lang, wala. Kasi yung mga makinarya na sinasabing nakakarating sa amin, totoong napakadami pong makinarya ang pinamimigay ang gobyerno. Subalit, mas marami po nabubulok doon sa mga bodega nila. Particular po dyan sa may Pilmek, nabubulok lang po yung mga makinarya. Pagkatapos po, yung mga makinaryang ibinababa naman ng gobyerno para sa magsasaka kuno, napipisan po o napupunta karamihan sa kung sino-sino lang, sa mga hindi tunay na magsasaka, sa mga peking kooperatiba na itinayo, kunwari para sa farmer pero hindi po. Sayang po ang proyekto ng gobyerno, napakaganda po kung makakaabot talaga sa amin. Kaya lang nga po, sabi ko na sa implementation po, poor. Kaya po kami mga farmer, nagiging lalong nagiging kaaba-aba. Sa totoo lang po, anong tawag dito? Hindi ko magano maipaliwanag kasi nga, nahihirapan po talaga kami. Lalo po ngayon dito sa bayan ng Laur, nagpaani po yung bayaw ko kahapon. Alam niyo po kung magkano isang kilo? 13 pesos po. 13 pesos po. Isipin nyo nga po, yung farm inputs namin napakataas. Sa fertilizer, ang pataba, yung urea, 4600, umaabot po ng 3,000, lowest ng 2,700. Gumagamit po kami ng abono, mga pinaka-minimum na po yun, 8 bags per hectare. Tapos yung gagamit din po kami ng diesel sa gasolina sa land preparation. Tapos yung pong labor sa pagtatanim, napakalaki po. Kaya umuubos po kami ng more or less 40,000 per hectare. Ang presyo po ng palay, napakababa. Tapos nasa lanta pa kami. Paano na po talaga kami yung farmer? Nakalimutan kami. Pero pag eleksyon po, kami bida. Ang dami pong party list. Tumatayo kung baga kinatawan namin. Wala din, hindi naman namin sila maapungan.
Ipapaabot po namin sa pamahalaan mga issues at concerns ninyo, Mang Felix. Maraming salamat po for joining us today. And that was it for today's agenda. Keep it here on Cignal TV channels 8 and 250 for the latest news. I'm Regina Lay. We are One News, all sides, all the time.